September 3rd, 2025, Beijing, China. A huge avenue blocked off to traffic. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. Thousands of them, all in the same rhythm. 12,000 soldiers marching in perfect formation through the streets of the Chinese capital. Behind them, huge missiles mounted on military trucks, parading slowly so everyone could see them clearly. Up there, on a historic balcony, 3 men were watching all of this. Xi Jinping, the leader of China, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, and Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, together, side by side. The message that China was sending to the world that day was simple. We have grown, we have armed ourselves, and if anyone wants to confront us, we are ready. On the other side of the sea, a small island also watched all of this. 23 million people looking at those missiles, those soldiers, that show of force. 8 months later, in May 2026, that island made a decision that left the Chinese government furious. It did what angers China the most. But before I reveal what it was, you need to know who this island is. Taiwan is an island in the Western Pacific, less than 200 kilometers from the coast of China. 23 million people live there. The country has its own government, its own currency, its own army, and holds elections. In practice, it functions as an independent country. The problem is that China doesn't see it that way. For the Chinese government, Taiwan is Chinese territory. It always has been, it always will be, and one day, one way or another, it will return to Chinese control. But Taiwan says no. And that's why the Taiwan Strait, those 200 kilometers of sea between the island and China, is now one of the most tense places on the planet. Now, to understand the magnitude of this tension, you need to see what China has built over the last 20 years. Look at this chart. In 2005, the Chinese Navy had a certain number of warships, in 2010 more, in 2015 even more. In 2020, it was the largest navy in the world in terms of number of vessels, even surpassing that of the United States. In less than 15 years, China built a huge fleet, warships, submarines, aircraft carriers, a naval capability that simply didn't exist a generation ago. And why does this matter to Taiwan? Because any attempt to take the island by force would depend on the sea. China would need to cross those 200 kilometers of water, with soldiers, tanks, equipment, everything. And the bigger the Chinese Navy, the more viable that becomes, at least on paper, but only on paper, and you'll understand why in a moment. While China was building this fleet, it also started sending more direct messages. In December 2025, the Chinese military carried out the largest military exercise ever conducted around Taiwan. They gave the exercise a name, Mission Justice 2025. And do you know what they practiced? A naval blockade, completely closing off the sea around Taiwan, cutting off the island's supplies, which needs to import almost everything it uses: fuel, food, machine parts. Without access to the sea, Taiwan starts to suffocate. In the exercise, China sent 130 aircraft, 14 warships, and several other Coast Guard vessels. They closed air routes and simulated the blockade of the ports. It was the largest show of force around Taiwan since 2022. And after the exercise, the Chinese government published an official poster. The poster showed an arm coming out of the map of China, holding a chain that wrapped around Taiwan. The name? Chain of Justice. The message was clear. Taiwan saw all of this. The ships, the planes, the poster, the exercises, and then did the thing that most irritates the Chinese government. On May 8, 2026, Taiwan's politicians voted and approved the purchase of $25 billion in American weaponry. To give you an idea of how big that number is, it's as if Brazil decided all at once to buy enough weapons to equip an entire army. $25 billion in weaponry bought from the United States, specifically aimed at making any attempt at a Chinese invasion more difficult. And look, actually spending that money, signing the contracts, transferring the funds, that's a more powerful message than any political speech. It tells the Chinese government, we're willing to pay a high price to keep existing. It tells the United States, we're doing our part. And it tells the whole world that Taiwan isn't waiting for someone to come save it. And do you know exactly what Taiwan is buying with that money? Two systems stand out. The first is the HIMARS. The name is complicated, but the concept is simple. The HIMARS is a truck with a missile launcher on top. It seems simple, but what it does is extraordinary. It can launch missiles that travel up to 300 kilometers away with surgical precision. 300 kilometers. This means that, in the event of a conflict, Taiwan would be able to strike ports on the Chinese coast. That's where the invasion ships would depart from, even before those ships leave their positions. Think about it. If you know where the enemy is going to depart from and you can strike that starting point with precision, you make their plan much more complicated right from the start. And there's more. The HIMARS is mounted on a truck. It fires and moves out, fires from one place, moves, fires from another. It's very hard to locate and destroy. Taiwan is buying more than 80 of these systems. With that, they'll have more than 100 in total. A concentration of firepower that no Chinese military planner can ignore. The second system is the Javelin. The Javelin is a portable anti-tank missile. A soldier can carry it on their shoulder and fire it alone. The idea is this. If any Chinese military vehicle manages to reach the shores of Taiwan, the Javelin is there to destroy it before the soldiers disembark. It's a cheap, effective weapon that has already proven its worth in another recent war. In Ukraine, the Javelins destroyed hundreds of Russian tanks, a weapon that an ordinary soldier can operate, destroying machines that cost millions of dollars. This is where the math starts to work against China. A Javelin costs about $175,000. The tank it destroys costs $2, $3, $4 million. Multiply that by hundreds of vehicles trying to cross a defended beach, and the cost of an invasion rises in a way that no general can ignore. But maybe you're thinking, China is much bigger than Taiwan. It has a huge army, it has missiles, planes, ships. It seems like it's just a matter of crossing the sea, right? Think again. Invading an island by sea. It's one of the most difficult and dangerous military operations there is, no matter the size of the attacking army. Let's take a historical example that everyone knows. D-Day. June 1944 in World War II. The Allies controlled the skies, had the largest fleet ever assembled in history, and thousands of trained soldiers. And even so, during the landing, the soldiers had to get off the boats and cross the beach on foot, exposed to enemy fire. Thousands died before reaching the sand. And France has a flat coastline with no natural defenses. Taiwan is different. Taiwan does have beaches, but most of the island's coastline is covered by cliffs and rugged terrain. There are very few places where it's physically possible to land soldiers by sea, and the Taiwanese military knows exactly where those places are. They're heavily defended. Besides, crossing more than 150 kilometers of open sea with ships loaded with soldiers and equipment is a huge, visible, slow, and vulnerable target. With the HIMARS, Taiwan can hit those ships long before they reach the shore, and the Javelins will be waiting for anything that eventually manages to make it to the beach. That doesn't mean China couldn't try. It means the cost would be extremely high, much higher than any general would be willing to accept. And China knows that. In fact, on Chinese army training grounds, there are physical replicas of Taiwan's HIMARS. They were built so that Chinese pilots and drones can train on how to locate and destroy these launchers before they fire. It's China silently acknowledging that these systems are game changers. But there's another, even deeper reason why China can never simply destroy Taiwan. Taiwan manufactures more than 90% of the world's most advanced electronic chips. These chips are inside absolutely everything. The cell phone you use, your family's car, airplanes, hospitals, military systems, everything. If Taiwan stops producing these chips, the whole world will feel it, and China would be one of the first to feel it. As you can see, China wants Taiwan. But it needs Taiwan to keep running. Bombing the island into surrender would destroy exactly what the Chinese government most wants to control. It's a trap with no easy way out, and it adds another factor against any decision to go to war. Now comes the most surprising detail of this whole story. Before I tell you, try to guess who you think approved those $25 billion in American weapons. The party that governs Taiwan, which is openly against China, or the opposition, the party that has historically supported a closer relationship with Beijing. Think for a second. It was the opposition, the party more sympathetic to China in Taiwan, that just approved the largest anti-China arms package in the country's history. And here's the detail. A month before that vote, the leader of that same party had personally traveled to Beijing and met with Xi Jinping. Why did they do that? Because the pressure from the United States was too great to ignore. Washington made it clear that it expected this approval. And any Taiwanese party that seemed to be blocking the purchase of American weapons would be putting itself in a very delicate position with the island's main ally. It wasn't a gesture of courage, it was a cold decision driven by self-interest, but the practical result is the same. Taiwan now has the approved funds to buy this arsenal. And this move doesn't happen on its own. Japan, a close neighbor in the region, announced at the end of 2025 the largest military budget since World War II. And in the military exercises that took place in the Philippines in May 2026, 7 countries trained together on how to respond to a seaborne invasion. The targets in the exercise were replicas of Chinese amphibious landing vehicles, the same ones that would be used to put soldiers on a beach. No one needed to say China's name out loud. Everyone understood. And to complete this picture, something happened that surprised even the most experienced analysts. This is Donald Trump on May 11, 2026, just a few days after the approval of the Taiwanese budget. He said he would bring up the issue of arms sales to Taiwan at the negotiating table with Xi Jinping at a summit that will take place on Wednesday the 13th in Beijing.
I have a great relationship with President Xi. I don't know what's going to happen.
No American president had ever done this before. Since 1982, there has been an unwritten commitment that the United States does not negotiate with China about what they sell to Taiwan. It's a line that had never been crossed. But Trump crossed it. For Taiwan, this statement was a shock because it means that the approved weapons could, in theory, become bargaining chips in a negotiation between the two largest powers in the world. For the Chinese government, it was exactly what they wanted to hear. China has always argued that American weapons for Taiwan are a provocation and that the United States should not get involved. And now, the American president himself was saying that maybe it's worth talking about it. It's a moment of intense tension. Taiwan approved the largest arsenal in its history, but the future of that arsenal may depend on a single conversation between Trump and Xi. The truth is that the world is changing, and the Taiwan Strait, that stretch of sea between China and the island, remains the place where this change will be decided. Taiwan bought weapons, China trains for blockades, Japan is rearming, and the United States is playing both sides. And in the midst of all this, millions of people on an island live each day knowing they are at the center of one of the most important disputes of the century. Deep down, this story isn't about missiles or military budgets, it's about the price a small nation is willing to pay to remain free. And about the question that no world leader can answer with certainty: how long will this balance last? That parade in Beijing was impressive, but impressive and invincible. They're very different things. The question that remains is, will this be resolved at the negotiating table or on the battlefield? Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you think China will try to take Taiwan by force someday, or will it prefer to continue quiet pressure? If this video helped you understand what's happening in the world, share it with someone who also wants to understand. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe. There's a lot more content like this coming soon. See you next time.